Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Mr. Squire's Civics and Economics class. Yeah. So, last week we covered everything from CE10A to CE10D, which focused on the organizations and the jurisdictions of the national and state courts, all the way down to due process and the 5th and 14th Amendment. Okay? This week, we are moving on to CE11, which focuses on economic decisions made in the marketplace. To better understand this, we need to first jump into the essential questions as well as the essential understandings. For CE11A, which focus on the concepts of scarcity, resources, choice, opportunity cost, price, incentives, supply and demand, and production, as well as consumption. So, with that being said, let's dive into the essential question and the essential understandings. The essential question for CE11 reads, how do people deal with scarcity, resources, choice, opportunity cost, price, incentives, supply and demand, production, and consumption? Then we move on to our essential understandings, which states, people make choices about how to use limited resources, decide the ownership of resources, and structure markets for the distribution of goods and services. We will better evaluate that now by going into the essential knowledge. The first thing we need to know is, what does scarcity mean? Scarcity is the inability to satisfy all wants at the same time. All resources and goods are limited. This requires that choices be made. The next term is resources, which are factors of production that are used in the production of goods and services. Types of resources are natural, human, capital, and entrepreneurship. Then we go to choice. Choice is a selection of an item or action from a set of possible alternatives. Individuals must choose and make decisions about desired goods and services because these goods and services are limited. Next up is opportunity cost. And opportunity cost is what is giving up when a choice is made. For example, the highest value alternative is foregone or erased. In the end, the individuals must consider the value of what is given up when making a choice. Next, we have price. Price is the amount of money exchanged for a good or service. Interaction of supply and demand determines price, and price also determines who acquires goods and services. Next, we have incentives. Incentives are things that incite or motivate. Incentives are used to change economic behavior. Then we have supply and demand, which is the interaction of supply and demand that determines price. Demand is the amount of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a certain price. And supply is the amount of good or service that producers are willing and able to sell at a certain price. Next, we have production. Production is the combining of human, natural, capital, and entrepreneurship resources to make goods or provide services. Resources available and consumer preferences determine what is produced. Then the last term we have is consumption, which is the using of goods and services, and consumer preferences and price determine what is purchased and consumed. So that is pretty much everything that wraps up CE 11A, which is the concepts when understanding how an economic decision is made in the marketplace. Now, let's move on to CE 11B, which focus all about major economic systems. But before we get into CE 11B and the major economic systems, let's make sure we cover the essential questions and essential understandings first. The essential question for CE 11B states, what are the basic economic questions all societies must answer? The next question is, what are the basic characteristics of traditional, free market, command, and mixed economies? And then the last essential question is, how does each type of economy answer the three basic questions? Now, moving on to the essential understandings. Every country must develop an economic system to determine how to use its limited productive resources. The key factor in determining the type of economy a country has is the extent of government involvement. We will better understand that now. There are three basic questions of economics. These three questions are, what will be produced, who will produce it, and for whom will it be produced? Also, you want to know that each type of economy answers these three basic questions differently. Okay? Now let's move on to the characteristics of major economic systems, as well as the four major economic systems. Okay. The characteristics describe that no country relies exclusively on markets to deal with the economic problem of scarcity. The four types of economies are as follows: traditional, free market, command, and mixed economy. In a traditional economy, economic decisions are based on custom and historical precedent, and people often perform the same type of work as their parents and grandparents, regardless of ability or potential. Then the next economy is the free market economy, which consists of private ownership of property and resources. It is profit motive. It enforces competition. It focuses on consumer sovereignty, which means consumers determine what is consumed, as well as individual choice and minimum government involvement in the economy. Then we move on to the command economy, which is centrally owned or has central ownership, which is usually by the government. Okay? which is centrally planned, usually by the government, and lacks consumer choice. Okay? Then we go down to mixed economy. Mixed economy consists of individuals and businesses who are owners and decision makers for the private sector. The mixed economy also has the government as a owner and a decision maker for the public sector. The government's role in a mixed economy is greater than in a free market economy. However, it is less than in a command economy. And lastly, most economies today, including the United States, are mixed economies. Now that we have briefly covered CE11B, let's move on to CE11C, which focuses on the characteristics of the United States economy. Okay? To further evaluate the characteristics of the United States economy, we must first briefly touch on the essential question and the essential understandings. Let's do that now. The essential question states, what are the essential characteristics of the United States economy? The essential understanding states, the United States economy is primarily a free market economy, but because there is some government involvement, it is categorized or characterized as a mixed economy. Also, government intervenes in a market economy when the perceived benefits of a government policy outweighs the anticipated cost. We will better evaluate that now. Characteristics of the United States economy states that markets are generally allowed to operate without undue interference from the government. Prices are determined by supply and demand as buyers and sellers interact in the marketplace. Private property, which is another characteristic, consists of individuals and businesses that have the right to own real and personal property as well as the means of production without undue interference from the government. The next characteristic of the United States economy is that it focuses on profit, and profit consists of earnings after all expenses are paid. Another characteristic of the United States economy is competition, which is the rivalry between producers and or between sellers of a good or service, usually results in better quality goods and services at lower prices. And the last characteristic of the United States economy is consumer sovereignty, which pretty much means that consumers determine through purchases what goods and services will be produced, and government involvement in the economy is limited. Most decisions regarding the production of goods and services are made in the private sector. With that being said, that wraps up everything relating to CE11A through C, which focus on CE11A focus on economic decisions made in the marketplace, all the way down to CE11C, which focus on the characteristics of the United States economy. At this time, take a moment to review over your notes to better understand CE11 and economics. With that being said, as always, it's your wild and crazy yet loving teacher, Mr. Squire. Peace out.